I am talking to our State Senator Bruce Tarr. Good afternoon, Senator. How are things?
Good afternoon, Heather. Things are good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a little chilly here in Cape Ann today. Whole totally different universe than last week when we spoke.
It is amazing the turn in the weather that we've had. And of course, no place on earth has the kind of pronounced weather that Cape Ann does. You can go from very hot days to very damp days and foggy days, but that's part of the character of where we live and why we love it so much.
That's right. That's right. So let's start with you spent this week working on which COVID emergency orders will be continued.
We did. So, as we had mentioned before when we talked, the public health emergency that was declared by Governor Baker, which now goes all the way back to last March, not a few months ago, March, but before that, to deal with COVID-19, had a number of executive orders that were tied to it and a number of pieces of legislation that were tied to it for emergency actions that were done. And all of those things that are tied to it will expire if we don't take further action before the 15th of June, which is for our viewers a day after they'll be watching this. So it'll be on Wednesday. And so there's a scramble on to try to figure out what we should extend, what we should not extend, and how we should approach all of those things. Now, the Department of Public Health is already working on extending some of its emergency regulations, but the vast majority of things that are being contemplated are legislative in nature. And so we put together a bill, and it was very collaborative and very bipartisan over the past week, and it was approved unanimously by the Senate on Thursday to be able to extend a number of different things. And the challenging part of describing this bill, Heather, is that it covers so many different topics. But I thought maybe we'd talk about a few just to give folks a feel for what we're talking about. It's things that I think are illustrative. So one of the things that is important, and we know for restaurants in our area it's critically important, is to be able to have outdoor dining. And so presently we live with emergency legislation that allows a establishment to petition the municipality to be able to have outdoor dining and to be able to continue to serve outdoors with alcohol if they have a license that's been granted by the local alcohol board. And so one of the things this bill does is extend that, and I want to make sure I get the date right, so I'm going to look, and that would go till April 1st of 2022. So the idea is to be able to get through the summer season and through the winter and into next spring. And the reason that the time is a little bit longer than some of the other things I'm going to talk about is there's tremendous interest in maybe extending this even further or making it permanent. But in order to do that, we have to understand the details better than we do today. So there are consequences for some of these outdoor dining arrangements. For instance, parking spaces can be lost in a downtown area. There can be the issue of noise and impact on abutters and other kinds of things. So the thinking is that we want to extend it. We want to make sure that restaurants can still avail themselves of it. But we also want to study a little bit further to see if it's something that we can continue, perhaps with some more restrictions or some more qualifications. So outdoor dining is probably the best example that I can think of that in this bill in terms of an extension. Closely related to that is the issue of delivering cocktails and having alcohol to go, which has been an important thing for our restaurants throughout the pandemic for a couple of reasons, one of which is for a long period of time, people really couldn't leave their home. And so if they were getting food, they might get alcohol to go with it from the restaurant that was going to provide that food either on a to-go or a delivered basis. And so in this bill, we do extend that. And again, making sure that we get the dates right. The extension for that one is to March 1st of 2022. And so that's an important date to think about. And there is some thought and discussion about extending that even further, but there are a lot of concerns that have been raised over the last couple of weeks about that. And they're in different categories. One of them has to do with how certain are we that when alcohol is being delivered, that it's being delivered to someone who's eligible to receive it, i.e. someone who's over 21 years of age. And being able to verify that can put a lot of pressure on a delivery service that may not be accustomed to making those kind of determinations. So I would suggest that the issue of delivering alcohol and having it to go is far more controversial than outdoor dining. But we do extend both of them in this bill. Something as well that's very important is allowing meetings of our local select boards and other local bodies, boards of health, conservation commissions, to be able to continue on a remote basis. And this bill does that as well. And again, looking at the summary, that would go to April 1st of 2022 as well. And the idea here as well is that we're extending this for a fairly long period of time because we think there may be merit in allowing this to continue in some form permanently. And by that, I mean, a lot of folks have expressed that they have been able to attend meetings that are held remotely that they would never have been able to if they had to attend in person. But there are some downsides to it. And so some folks are concerned that the quorum of the board that's meeting should be physically present. And so there might be a way to have a hybrid version of this where the quorum is present physically, but other folks can attend remotely. So for right now, we're extending it just to allow it to happen. But I suspect there'll be a lot of discussion about what the future is going to look like with regard to remote meetings. Now, the last thing that I would mention is that we also, during the pandemic, have done an awful lot with telemedicine because it's been a way to provide access and continuity for people that need to interact with their healthcare professionals that during the darkest days of the pandemic couldn't leave their home. And you know, we were discouraging folks from moving about too much in society. But what we found is there's still a value to telemedicine in terms of its convenience and its cost effectiveness. And so we're going to extend that, and we're extending it in terms of payment as well. So one of the provisions of the bill says that a telemedicine visit, at least for now, will be compensated at the same amount as an in-person visit. Now that is subject to change in the future, but for now, to be able to continue the benefits that we've seen from it, we're going to extend that as well. So this is a bill that touches a great many aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic and what we've had to experience through it. And I'm very positive about it. The bill, as I mentioned, was passed unanimously by the Senate. Will go to the House next week. I was speaking with Representative Ferranti earlier today about the need to expedite it there, and she believes that is the case as well, and believes that the House will take this up in an expeditious fashion. And our goal is to get the bill onto the governor's desk and signed as close to June 15th as possible, which doesn't leave us very much time. And that's why you see a lot of extensions in the bill as opposed to making things permanent, because that could be far more controversial and could create far more debate. These extensions, we think, are a way to move forward quickly to have some continuity.
So I just want to clarify one little piece, and it's a super basic piece, but I want to ask this question, or I want to clarify this. So this legislation simply allows municipalities to make these decisions on their own, right?
Correct. Correct. It does not dictate that things will happen automatically, and it does not create interference with the local decision-making process. It allows it to continue.
Well, let's move on. You have been hard at work at this, or the House has been hard at work at the supplemental budget.
So the House did take up this week a supplemental budget. And again, as we're talking right now, we're talking on a Friday. And so this week, the House took up a budget that spent about $260 million. And supplemental budgets are done when certain accounts fall into deficiency because planning is not always perfect. And sometimes, for instance, a human service caseload is different than what we might have expected, or there might be some other condition that we didn't anticipate. And so the House put forward a budget, and the governor had filed a supplemental budget that the House considered for about $260 million. And there are a number of outside sections to that budget, which are very significant as well. And you may recall that outside sections are policy matters that are addressed that may not relate directly to the spending that's in the budget. And I want to highlight for you one that's particularly important because it's something that I've been working on for a number of years, and it's absolutely imperative that we have continuity with regard to this, and that is the Fiscal Management and Control Board for the MBTA. So a number of years ago, when the MBTA was stress tested by the blizzards that we had in that winter, I believe it was 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
we were able to put together a fiscal management and control board. And I was the principal author of that amendment in the Senate, along with the chair of the Committee on Transportation. And it was meant to be a temporary mechanism to be able to get things under control and start moving us in the right direction. That control board is about to expire. And so one of the things that the House did was include a provision, an outside section, to continue it, but to continue it not as a 5-member body, but as a 7-member body. I had actually made that proposal in the Senate version of the budget. It didn't pass at that time, but I do think that it will ultimately become the case that will make the Fiscal Management and Control Board more permanent, and will add some members primarily to represent riders who are very important in this equation and need to have a voice. And that's just one example of one of the outside sections that's in the House budget. Now, there are a lot of others, and frankly, we're still digesting those in my office and in the Senate. And I expect that we'll be taking up that supplemental budget fairly soon.
So how well will this board represent the homes living around the stations that are bothered by the noise?
Well, that's an important question. And I would say that, we are having ongoing and vigorous conversations with the MBTA about that subject right now. Obviously, we had an issue in West Gloucester that arose because the trains couldn't run over the bridge over the Annisquam River that's being replaced. But when that bridge is completed, and we expect to have at least one track in service this summer, then the trains will again be returning to Rockport. And we need to think about how we can address the sound issues there. That's a difficult challenge to be able to do, because the trains come in very late in the evening, actually some of them early in the morning, and other trains leave just a few hours later. And so we're trying to work on a number of different solutions. There was installed a power station that allows them to be plugged in more often so that they don't need to necessarily run as often, but that doesn't solve the problem. And so we're still working on that, and the Fiscal Management and Control Board has an obligation to listen. I believe they will, but we also need to continue our conversations with the MBTA. And the Board of Selectmen in Rockport and the town administrator have been very, very vocal about that. And Representative Ferrante and I have been working on that with them, and we'll continue to work with them. But overall, we need to have a management structure at the MBTA that's effective and responsible. And that's what continuing the Fiscal Management and Control Board is all about.
And we will be following the supplemental budget and your work with that. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
Yes, we look forward to talking next week, Heather, and I think we'll have a report on the finality of the COVID-19 extension bill, and maybe a little bit more on the supplemental budget, and maybe more news as well. And we look forward to that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.